Hello and welcome back to the HoopsCrush podcast. Today is episode 2, and today we're going to go around the league and rank our top 10 young cores in the NBA currently as of right now because, as we all know, the Blazers went in a bit of a rebuild mode, so we're curious to see where we have the Blazers ranked as far as a top 10 young core is concerned. But before we go any further, Eric, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good as well. I'm excited to see where you have these Blazers ranked, and I'm curious to see if you agree with where I have them. So should be a ton of fun to kind of see where we have these listed. And this one was hard for me, man. It was really hard because I feel like I left off some teams that deserve to be in the top 10, but I don't know. It was tough.
Yeah, for the record, if you tell me I'm stupid and should have had a team higher, I might actually agree with you. Because
yeah, I feel like that. I feel the same way, kind of.
As we're about to hit record, I'm telling Brady here that I'm still like changing my list as we're talking. I'm rethinking my list. And
Absolutely.
all that,
So the ground rules we set today. So originally I thought we were going to do like 25 and younger, but to make it even a little bit more condensed, we did 24 and younger. So guys like Shea, Jarrett Allen that I can think of, guys that are like literally 25 do not make the list. So that definitely hurt some of these young cores just a little bit, especially for your Blazers that had Ayton and Robert Williams. I wrote them down at first, and I'm like, oh, we're not doing 25. So that hurts just a little bit for some teams, which is why this list became even tougher for me. So, but it was a ton of fun, and I'm curious to see if people agree or disagree with us. So feel free to leave any feedback y'all have in the comments, of course, where we have the Blazers, whatever team that you want to argue with. It's totally fine with me.
And also put your top 10 or top 3 or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
In the comments below. We'd love to read all of yours.
Do you want to start with some honorable mentions? Because I have some teams that I left off that I felt really, really bad about.
First, let's just... Okay, so you said the rule. If they've turned 25, they're no longer eligible for our list. We wanted to cut it off at a certain point. But I'm curious as to your process. Did you have like a system to do this? So what was your system? We didn't talk about that. We let each other do our own thing. So
yeah. So this was my system, and I didn't know how to break it down at first, but my system was the upside of, obviously my opinion probably doesn't hold as much value as to someone like you who actually watched these guys in college. And no, it's just simply because I didn't watch them in college at all. Like I literally watched them when they come into the NBA. Yeah. So it's like maybe I don't have a feel for some of these guys like maybe you do. So my thought process was like, do I see these guys maybe being like an all-star one day? Are they a starter? Or are they just a role player? That's kind of like what my thought process was. And that's just like how I kind of went about it. Like if I felt like a team had 3 guys that I could see being an all-star, I kind of ranked them a little bit above. But it also depends on the situation at the end of the day as well. So like a team like the Rockets right now, they're probably in here for you if they are for me. It's kind of weird because they obviously signed like Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks. Yeah. So who knows what minutes takes away. Then we obviously have like Brogdon now and stuff. So, but I didn't take that part into account too much. But yeah, that was my thought process.
Yeah, I kind of set it up like college football recruiting. So like I listed all the young players on a team, and then I assigned them either 0 to 5 stars. So obviously, like the 5-star blue chips, like LeBron James would be a 5-star if he was young enough, And then I kind of figured out, I definitely feel like to have a top 10 young core, you have to have at least a fringe 5-star player. That's going to possibly be, a player that could lead your team, or be like a number 1 on a good team. So that's kind of how I went about it and just kind of ranked. And then some teams had like a lot of 2 and 3-star players and not a 4 or 5-star. So like I didn't rank them as high, put quality over quantity. And then some teams had like 1 superstar and not much else, and so it was hard to like rank them high too because they don't really have a core outside of like 1 player. So it was really difficult to some of these to differentiate between what would be considered better.
Yeah, for sure. So my honorable mention, my first one. Well, maybe I could. Do you want me to say all 4 that I leave off?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the top 2 I feel absolutely terrible about, especially one of them. So the Cavaliers were one for me because of Evan Mobley and Garland. But obviously, I didn't feel like that was enough. And Okoro, if you want to throw him in there as well. So I left them off. Pelicans, I left off as well. Zion is still there. And they have like Dyson Daniels and Jordan Hawkins. And I felt really bad about leaving the Pelicans off as well. And then these other two, I left the Jazz off. And I also left the Hornets off the list. So
with all but the Cavs, I agree with you. So Pelicans, if Zion was consistently healthy,
absolutely,
I think there would be no question they'd be in the top 10. But you just can't rely on him, so I can't really put him over teams with even. I mean, Zion's probably the best or one of the best players on this list if he's not having these injury problems. So it's hard to like knock him, like you said. But yeah, unfortunately, you can't count on him, so you got to move him down a little bit.
Yeah, I also love Trey Murphy a lot, so that was hard for me as well.
Right.
But yeah, Zion, I think the biggest thing was Zion. Just it really hurt me. For that one, really hurt me. The Jazz, I didn't know if they had enough upside. Like some of the guys they have, I don't know if any of them. And again, I don't have like a ton of experience watching these guys, so I could be totally off base with this. But with this one, but I don't know enough about like Taylor Hendricks and Keontae George, what their ceiling is in the NBA. So I wasn't ready to put them on the list for me personally.
Yeah, they're a team for me. The reason why I didn't is because I don't feel like they have a true number one yet. Yeah. They still have a ton of draft picks and stuff to where they could get there. And Walker Kessler's year last year definitely bumped them up to like possibly being mentioned here. And then I feel like they had a really good draft. But Taylor Hendricks and Keontae George, I don't know if they're going to be like star players. They're like high end role players / low end stars if they did become stars. So I completely agree with you there. Didn't quite see the top end ceiling to include them over some of these other teams.
And then the Hornets, love LaMelo. Brandon Miller remains to be seen, but he projects hopefully to be pretty good. Mark Williams I like. Nick Smith Jr. There's definitely some weird things going on with some of their other young guys like Kai Jones and James Bouknight, but yeah. I left them off. It was them or my 10th spot. They were really close to making my list. That would have been like my first snub was the Hornets.
Yeah, they would have been like 12th on my list, I think, or maybe 13th, like right around there. So yeah, not too far off. LaMelo definitely was one of those guys who was, a fringe 5-star in my rankings, and so it was tough to leave someone like him off the list. But he's also battled some injuries the last couple of years. When he's healthy, that team has been, a close to playoff team, and he's elevated them. But when he's not available, that team has not been good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so he's got to kind of prove that he can stay on the court this year, in my opinion.
Yeah, hope he does. I actually drafted him with my first round pick in fantasy, so I mean it's just a free league, but yeah. I'm cheering for him this year. I'll be ready for number 10 on this list.
Yeah, let's go.
All right, my number 10. I said it was between them or the Hornets or this team. My 10 is the Minnesota Timberwolves. For me, it's Anthony Edwards, man. I'm a huge Anthony Edwards guy. I think the guy has all the ceiling in the world. The team around him, I mean, who knows what they'll end up turning into after the Gobert trade. Obviously, things didn't look great last year. But Edwards, bright future, whether it's in Minnesota or somewhere else, because, maybe Anthony Edwards is too bright for Minnesota now, according to some articles written out there this offseason. And then Leonard Miller, Naz Reid, Jaden McDaniels, and then, name some few other guys like Jalen Clark, Josh Minott, Wendell Moore. But Anthony Edwards did it for me as far as putting them in the top 10.
Yeah, they're actually number 8 on my list, so a little spoiler there. Anthony Edwards bumps it up. Jaden McDaniels is on pace to be one of the higher end role players in the league, one of the best defenders in the league. So you pair those two together, and I just think Anthony Edwards his potential to be a star is just so great that it's hard to leave him off the list. So yeah, I put him a little higher than you, but I definitely don't think like 8 to 10 range is off base there.
Awesome. Who's your number 10?
My number 10 is the Dallas Mavericks.
Okay.
And this one was really tough for me. it came down. So my honorable mention that I do not have on my list is the Houston Rockets.
Wow, that's crazy.
And I know. I'm probably going to get some heat from that, but I feel like all the teams on my list have a player that's better than any of the young players on the Rockets. And so they have definitely the quantity of really solid players. But it was like, do you value that over someone like Luka, who can absolutely show that he can carry a team, has already been to the conference finals as an under 25-year-old player? And then they add a couple of first-round picks this year, and Derek Lively and Omax Prosper. And they still have a couple of young guys like Josh Green as well. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it was tough, but I just think Luka being a perennial MVP candidate already, I just think you have to bump them up a little bit. I can understand if people are more excited or think that other teams have more potential, but I think Luka carries them to 10th on my rankings.
Yeah, Mavericks actually like literally kind of reverse of what Timberwolves were for you. They're my 8 as well.
Okay.
So Grant Williams, Jaden Hardy also fall into that. So yeah, that's why they had to make the list for me. They just got Grant Williams this offseason. But yeah, they're my number 8. So just all the reasons you said. Luka Doncic, of course, absolutely amazing. So no surprise there. They had to make the list. If Luka was 25, I don't know if I would have put them on here, but he was still 24. So
Yep.
My number 9 is the Memphis Grizzlies. So John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and then honestly, they have kind of a plethora of young guys, but like obviously a lot of them don't play minutes necessarily. So John Morant, Jaren Jackson, just got Gigi Jackson, Santi Aldama, who does play minutes. Tillman plays minutes, but like Jake LaRavia, Kenneth Lofton, David Roddy, and then Zaire Williams, who hasn't been all that impressive so far, but they definitely have a plethora of a young core. But the main reason for me is obviously John Morant, Jaren Jackson still falling into that 24-year-old spot. Desmond Bane at 25 almost kind of made it in there, obviously, as well, but with him being 25, that took him out. But yeah, I think John Morant, Jaren Jackson, I feel like I had to put him on the list, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have Memphis at 7.
Okay.
Yeah, so not too much off. I honestly had them at 1.2 on my list. And that's just because Ja and Jaren Jackson, you already have 2 like all-star players, 2 blue chip prospects. But like you said, like no one else really. They've been young for a couple of years now, but they haven't found like another guy since they got those 2. And so yeah, it's tough because those 2 guys are probably about as good of a tandem as anyone on the list. You can maybe argue, Garland and Mobley. But like, yeah, outside of those 2, it's hard to put them too much higher. But I did think that maybe it's just a little bit of hindsight, knowing what happened with Ja, and maybe he gets knocked down a little bit because of the off-court issues from last season, and now being suspended for part of this season. But I mean, he should come back. It's not like he got hurt or something. And like, so, and then you saw Jaren Jackson was like an Olympian this summer, and was defensive player of the year last year. So not only do you have someone who should be back into being the MVP in the MVP discussion, in John Morant after this season, because of a suspension he won't be considered, but in the following years, and then you have a defensive player of the year candidate as well. I think you definitely have to include them. I don't know if that's much of a core of 2 guys.
Yeah, definitely those 2 highlighted. They got a few young guys after that, but none of them like too appealing for the most part. But I think that reveals our 10, 9, and 8 then, right? And then your 7 was also the Grizzlies, or is there one team that we didn't reveal for you?
I have not done my 9 yet.
Oh yeah, go ahead for your 9.
So my 9, man. So I have the San Antonio Spurs.
Oh wow.
And I'm definitely like because you see Wemby play preseason last night, and it's like he should be carrying them, but it's just hard to. It's hard to like think about one guy,
Yeah,
that
I get
hasn't
that.
played yet. It's just tough. I'm assuming they're going to be much higher for you on your
Yeah,
list.
there's two teams you said already that were way higher on my
Yeah.
list.
Yeah, so, I mean, I really like Devin Vassell as well. And they have a bunch of other guys like Jeremy Sohan, Keldon Johnson, still under 25. I like Dominic Barlow, City Sissoko, Trey Jones I like. So a lot of guys I really like on that team. They have a ton of young guys, hardly any vets on that roster.
Yep.
And Wemby's going to make this look stupid in a very short amount of time, whether that's a year or two down the road. I just think they're not quite ready to be good yet, and that's going to kind of make it seem like they're not as good of a core when they really are. And they just signed Vassell to a big extension. And I think he was having a breakout season last year, and he had some injury problems as well. But I think that guy is going to solidify himself as a starter in this league and a really good player. And I don't know if they have enough outside of Wemby. And I mean, they have a lot of players and several that can break out still. I just don't know if they have that much around the core yet.
Yeah, definitely. So your 7 was the Grizzlies, right? So I can reveal
Yes.
my 7. My 7 was the Indiana Pacers. So obviously Tyrese Halliburton, Benedict Mathurin. I actually absolutely love what the Pacers decided to do. Obviously, they were one of the most mid teams possible with Sabonis, Miles Turner. They were just always solid and never really went to anywhere. And then since then, they've got Halliburton, Mathurin, Jarris Walker. Obviously, we'll see what he does in the NBA. And obviously, they have Andrew Nembhard, Isaiah Jackson, Nesmith, Shepard, and then also Jalen Smith. But I really love that backcourt of Halliburton and Mathurin going forward, or if they're playing Mathurin at the 3 or whatever. But those two alone, I feel like I had to put them, and I'm a big Halliburton fan, so yeah, I think I had to put them up here for me at 7.
Yeah, I won't reveal where I have the Pacers quite yet, much like you with the Spurs. But yeah, Halliburton is awesome, and I'll talk more about that, I guess, when I get to mine.
All right, sounds good. Do you want to do your 6, or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
My number 6 was the Portland Trailblazers.
Okay.
So I have the Blazers at number 6. I think I would have had them a ton higher if we were able to keep Ayton and Robert Williams on this list, but both of them being 25 kind of graduated out of it. But when you look at the Blazers roster, obviously the top 3 guys, Scoot, Sharp, Simons, those 3 alone, as I said, I could see all 3 of them one day being all-stars potentially. Remains to be seen, obviously, but I think I had to have all 3 of them be really good upside players for me. And outside of that, of course, you have Chris Murray, Tamani Kamara, and Jabari Walker. But I just like some of the other teams' depth as far as their young core is concerned, which is why I had the Blazers at number 6. So yeah, that was where I had them.
Yeah, it's 3 players versus 2 or 5, some cases 4 or 5 really good young players. It's definitely tough to figure out which one you like better. So are you feeling like you have them too low on this list? Is that
the Blazers?
Yeah.
No, honestly,
did you want to put them higher? Or?
I did because we're a Blazers podcast, but after looking at it, I felt pretty good about where I have them. Again, I think if we were able to put Robert Williams, Ayton in here, that would have changed it for me a little bit. But I mean, outside of the top 3, Scoot, Sharp, Simons, it remains to be seen what Chris Murray, Walker, and Kamara are. And obviously, if you asked anybody else around the league, they're probably not too excited to hearing those names because they haven't done anything just yet. But we'll see what they do. I'm not counting them out at all, but that's why I had to put them at 6.
All right. My number 6 is the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Oh, wow, you did have them on here. Okay.
Yeah, you mentioned them earlier. I really like Garland a lot, and I'm a huge Evan Mobley fan. I would have taken him number 1 in that draft. So I just think, like you said, they don't have much else. So it's similar to like Memphis that we talked about with Jaw and Jaren Jackson. An offensive-minded guard with a defensive-minded forward. I actually like Mobley a little bit better defensively than Jaren Jackson. Just hasn't got the same level of respect yet. But yeah, I just think those two, I mean, they're already really good. And they kind of carried them in my rankings to number 7. But now thinking about it, like, I probably should have had the Spurs higher. But yeah, I really think that Mobley and Garland are going to lead that team for years to come.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with the Cavaliers. That's why I kind of had them on here. I feel like they didn't have enough young players that, they have like Amani Bates and Okoro, of course, outside of those two. Then there's some other guys, but I thought those two alone couldn't do it for me, but yeah, they're absolutely amazing for sure. So I don't hate that at all. My number 5 for my top 5 list starts with the Orlando Magic. Absolutely love what they're very deep. Now the problem with the Magic is some of these guys may never truly get an opportunity. Like, I don't know if Cole Anthony is ever going to do anything in Orlando. Is Jalen Suggs ever going to do anything in Orlando? They kind of a logjam at the guard. They just had Anthony Black to that equation. Markelle Fultz is still there. So, like, on paper, they have a really good young core of young players. I don't know if they all stay there, but of course, Paulo, Franz Wagner, 2 guys I'm expecting to be like cornerstones of that franchise, and their ceilings are very high in my opinion. Anthony Black, we'll see what he is when he gets in the league. And then you have Jet Howard, Gogo Badatste as a name as well, who's still young, Caleb Houston, but I'm not really sure if those 2 guys project to be anything crazy. But Paulo, Franz Wagner, and then all the other young guys like Wendell Carter as well, elevated them to the top 5 for me.
All right. Well, I'll wait to say where they are on my list as well. Number 5 for me was the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Okay.
They would have been number 1 if SGA qualified for this, I think. But just got to see what Chet does first. But then you also have the runner-up for Rookie of the Year, Jalen Williams. And a lot of other, they picked Cason Wallace in the draft, who I think will fit in really well with that team. So they got a lot of good young players. And I'm assuming you have them higher, so we can wait to talk more about that in depth later. But yeah, I think Chet's going to be an amazing player, but much like Wemby, I don't know. I couldn't necessarily put him until I see it in actual games higher than some of these other cores, but Chet's another guy who could make this look really silly.
Yeah, I don't have them much higher. I have them at 4, so it was like right around where you had them. So absolutely everything you said. If Shea was on here, it would have been a different ball game. I wrote him down at first, and then when the rules changed, I was like, okay, that eliminates him. But Ousmane Deng, Josh Giddey, Lou Dort, Chet, Isaiah Joe, Cason Wallace, Jalen Williams, Keontae Johnson, Trey Mann, Poku, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, Jalen Williams, they're a very, very young roster. So, but obviously Josh Giddey, Chet kind of highlight that, and they're both really, really good. Obviously Chet got hurt last year, so he'll qualify as a rookie this year. But his ceiling is very high. They took him at number 2 for a reason. But yeah, Thunder's young core, absolutely amazing. And they're a team that people are expecting to maybe be a play-in / playoff team this year as a young team. So there's a lot of expectations for the Thunder this year based off how SGA broke out last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they're building towards something. It's difficult though, because if you have a lot of good players that are all like similar, like they finally get Chet this year, which will be different, but they were very like guard or wing heavy in the past.
Definitely.
And so it's like, are you going to get some bigs to go along with this like a couple years ago? And so Chet, that's a lot of responsibility for him, though, to be the big man and not have some sort of bruiser or like veteran setter there to help take some of the burden off. So it'll be interesting to see how he holds up having to fight with bigs the entire season. But yeah, I absolutely love their young core. Jalen Williams was a stud last year. And well, I like the other Jalen Williams too. They have two of them.
Yeah.
But he's more of like a role player. But this Jalen Williams really showed something. Giddey is just such a smart player, and he's just like a winning type player. So I think if this team can stay healthy, I think they could make a lot of noise this year.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if they ever like push their chips in and go all in on like a big trade if someone were to become available. I don't know if I mean they obviously have a plethora of assets, so I'm curious to see if that ever happens for the Thunder. But it should be fun to see if they ever do.
Yeah.
But your number 4 then, because that was my number 4.
All right, my number 4 is the Detroit Pistons.
Okay.
And this is another team that I really struggled with because it is almost solely dependent on Cade. And he's had his injury issues, but like you see flashes of what he could be playing against the USA team in the practices this summer, and he just dominates and looks like unstoppable in the pick and roll and stuff like that. And then his teammate in that those scrimmages was Jalen Duren, and he looked like an absolute beast out there as well. So I really like those two a lot. Jalen Duren's actually one of my favorite young bigs in the NBA right now. And you add a Sir Thompson to that too, who's looking like a guy who can do everything on the court and just be one of those guys that is a perfect fit and does all the things you need to win games. So yeah, man. And then it's not even including some of their other young guys. Let me just make sure I don't forget anyone here. You got Jaden Ivey, who still has a ton of potential as well. I really like Marcus Sasser, who they got in the draft as a backup guard. And then they have some old young bigs still in Marvin Bagley and James Wiseman.
Yeah.
Isaiah Stewart to provide some depth. So yeah, I think their ceiling is still possibly the best young core. I just kind of like we were talking about the Pelicans. It's just hard to put them, in my opinion, higher just because some of the other cores have already shown a little bit or have a young guy added to that core that I think will be better than anyone on their team. And so that's why I rate them. We're at number 4 instead of higher.
Yeah, absolutely. My number 3 was a team you said earlier, and that was the San Antonio Spurs. Victor Wembanyama, obviously all the hype around him coming into the league. They got Vassell, who they just extended. Jeremy Sohan. They got Keldon Johnson still is under 25. Trey Jones, Branham, Blake Wesley, a very solid young core in San Antonio. It always felt like the Spurs, for me, when they went into their rebuild, they never had the guy, right? Like Keldon Johnson was fine. Vassell, kind of break out last year, but now they get to add the guy potentially in Victor Wembanyama, who is pretty much the best hyped prospect since LeBron James. We all know how hyped he's been. So there's a lot of expectations for him in his rookie season. So I feel like now that the Spurs got that, they've elevated to me into a top 3 young core in the league for me.
Yeah, I'm starting to agree with you. I wish I didn't have them so low. It's weird because Wemby had all this hype, and rightfully so. I mean, the guy just is going to be an absolute game changer. But, like, you haven't heard much about him. I mean, I know people are waiting in line for the preseason game, but from summer league to preseason, like, there's been... It's like the hype train just took a pause for a little bit. So, like, I guess in my mind, like, I just, like, not that I forgot about him, but like he just hasn't been at the front of my mind. Like obviously the Blazers core and some of these other young cores have been. So I think that's just my mindset was, man, like Wemby's just, I don't know, like is he going to live up to the hype right away, or is it going to take some time?
I have a feeling he won't, to be honest, because the ceiling or the expectations people have on him are honestly probably unfair.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's just like Wiggins also. He was the next LeBron. Like these expectations of these guys coming to the league, it's really hard to live up to that in your rookie season when you're just figuring things out. So for me, not I feel like Wembanyama can have an okay season, and there's gonna be some people out there calling him a bust. Like that's what it's gonna be for him, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's what I think. He'll average like 20 points per game on decent efficiency, 9 rebounds a game. And San Antonio might not, vie for the play-in or anything. They might be one of the worst teams in the West just because the West is so tough. But, like, yeah, like people are going to be like, oh, this guy's supposed to be the next LeBron James.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like LeBron did that much better his rookie year. So I have absolutely agree with that. Like, he's every bad game he has, people are going to be like, bust.
Jumping on him. It's going to be, I mean, I'm sure he won't care as much, I'm assuming, but I know the media is going to be, and the people around, Twitter or whatever are going to, it's going to be a lot of hate there, I feel like, regardless of what he does.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say your 3? Or no, you didn't.
My number 3 is the Pacers.
Okay.
Someone that you already mentioned had a little lower. But I, much like you, love Tyrese Halliburton, and he's already shown that he can be a top-end point guard in this league. I'm also extremely high on Bennedict Mathurin. I thought he was going to be a star coming out last year. Had a decent rookie year, kind of tailed off, but did get off to a good start last year. And I think once they move on from Hield, if that happens, I think you'll see him in a much more comfortable role as the guy there next to Halliburton. And I do like Jarris Walker is another guy that I absolutely love, and I think he's a perfect fit next to Miles Turner. So I kind of, this might be kind of cheating because I'm about to say something different for another team, but I liked how they had a point guard that was really good that I think has star potential, a 2/3 that was really good that had a lot of potential that I think could be an all-star someday, and then a 4-man that could also potentially be a all-star level player in the future as well. So I like that they had a mix of different positions. I think that'll help them moving forward, is that they already have, like, not only do they have a good core of young players, but they also have players that can field a complete team. You're not just saying, oh, they're all guards or they're all big men or whatever.
Yeah, Pacers rebuild has been amazing to me. As I said earlier, them trading Sabonis for Halliburton was a home run in my opinion. Kings obviously look decent off of it as well, but getting Halliburton for Sabonis I think was a home run, and he's been absolutely amazing in Indiana. So I could definitely see why you have them that high. Big Halliburton fan. But my number 2 is the Detroit Pistons. So really like what the Pistons have. On draft night, same draft, they were able to get both Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren. And I thought that was a home run draft for them. Cade Cunningham, as I said, Duren, Ivey, and then they got Stewart, Sar Thompson, who they just drafted at number 5. So for me, when I was taking into account, I saw 4 guys who could potentially maybe a Sar might be a little too high of a projection, but I feel like Cade, Ivy, and Duren could maybe all 3 potentially be all-stars one day. Maybe I'm too optimistic. Asar, borderline for me, because of just how much hype there. I know Amin is projected to be the better one, but I liked those 4 guys alone, which is why those 4, we're able to project them into my second favorite young core in the league. As you said, Cade does have his injury issues. And so I guess I could have maybe knocked the Pistons down like I did the Pelicans because of Cade, but I don't know, man. I feel like the Pistons' young core is really, really good, and it's just a matter of it all clicking together.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think for me, Cade and Ivy both, in my opinion, probably need the ball in their hands if they're reach their maximum potential. So it's like if you prop one up into that role, the other one maybe suffers a little bit. So I don't think they could both get there on the same team. I mean, it's possible. I could be wrong. But,
yeah, for sure.
I think that's my only nitpick at that is because Cade obviously, I think is a primary ball handler if he's maximized, because with that size and that ability to handle the ball and read defenses off the pick and roll, I just think that's a game changer when you talk about players that have like a physical build like that and can navigate through defenses and things. I put Cade up there a little bit, but I really liked Ivy coming out, and I think he had a decent rookie year. I just don't know if he's like a spot up shooter or whatever. Like he's not the greatest in that role. So I individually I think I like a lot of what you said, and I completely agree that all four of those guys could eventually be all-stars. And yeah, I mean, they should take a big jump in a year or two if everyone stays healthy.
Yeah, for sure. I was kind of hoping that they would take a jump last year, but Cade got hurt very early on, so that definitely hurt them a little bit. But who is your number 2?
My number 2 is the Portland Trailblazers.
Oh, man.
So I haven't said them yet.
Yeah, I just realized that.
Yeah. So for me, once again, this is really tough because this is projections. And I just got done saying, like, I liked how the Pacers had a bunch of guys at different positions. But I think Scoot has the potential to be better than anyone on the Pacers or Pistons. So despite them having more guys, I think, than the Blazers have, or more well-rounded cores, I just think Scoot's top end potential, along with Anthony Simons and Shaedon Sharpe, who I both love, I just think if they reach their ceiling, potentially 2 or 3 of those guys could be better than a lot of these other players we've been talking about. And so it could be that they never reach that potential, and that looks silly. But I just think that despite them all being guards, they all have what I think should be all-star level play very quickly. Anthony maybe as soon as this year, even though he's not going to make an all-star team because there's so many guards in the West especially. But like I think he could be a fringe all-star level player this season, and Scoot I don't think is going to be very far behind him in a year or two. And then if you throw Sharpe, like what he showed during the last few games of the season, I know there's not much else other than them. They're really high on Ryan Rupert and Chris Murray, but those guys to me are more role players. Could be high end role players, but not really star type players, and that's fine. You don't need all your guys to be stars. But I think just the fact that there's 3 of them and they all have the ability, it would not surprise me at all if you tell me 5 years from now both Sharpe and Anthony Simons are like 25 to 27 point per game scorers, and Scoot is like a 20 and 10 guy with assists and just setting those guys up. And so it's probably a little homerism and a little biased, but I think Scoot is that good, and I think Charlotte's going to look back at that draft and just hopefully it's going to be our reverse Jordan draft.
That would be awesome, man. If that worked out for us that way. I mean, Scoot, Sharpe, Simons. I'm really hoping that all 3 can work it together here, because although the grand prize right now is Scoot and Sharpe, and Simons is like some people just want to trade Simons and keep Brogdon or whatever it is. Like there's people out there that actually think that, and that there's some people that, as I said last week, that think Simons is the worst contract in the league, and I can't wait till he can go out there and prove people wrong, because he definitely isn't. I hope that all 3 can work it here. I really do. I want to be able to keep all 3 of them. Is that possible? Do we have to trade one of them to unlock the other? I'm not sure. But I do love all three of their ceilings, even if they're not all three here. I think Scoot's obviously the safest one here, but like Sharp, Simons, there might be conversations down the line. But I'm hoping there's no conversations and all three of them can work, because that would be amazing. Because I think all three of them are really, really good and their ceilings are very, very high. But yeah, I like them at. I don't hate them at 2 at all for sure. But you ready for my number 1?
Yeah, let's do it.
It's a team that didn't even make your list. It's the Houston Rockets.
Oh, wow.
I have the Rockets at number 1. I really love their young core. Man, Jalen Green, Jabari, Amin Thompson, Tari Eason, Cameron Whitmore, Şengün, and then the last guy with ... question marks who will probably be gone off the team soon. I won't even mention his name. But Jalen Green, Jabari, I feel like ceilings are very high, and hopefully with Ime Udoka coming in there, that a lot of things can change about the culture. The one thing I do hate, and I'll say it, as much as I like Fred VanVleet, since he's from where I'm at, I don't think he makes sense in Houston. I never liked it, especially when they drafted Amin Thompson. I know he got a bag there, but I feel like he's going to take minutes away. Dylan Brooks also, it's kind of funky in my opinion. So that's the only thing I do hate about what the Rockets are doing right now, because I feel like if they were able to play all these young guys together, maybe you sign like one vet, right? Like go get one vet, but like you don't need to sign like Jeff Green, and they gave a decent bag to Jeff Green who might play a little bit. They got Cameron Whitmore at pick number 20. We'll obviously see what he turns out, but for me, Jalen Green, Jabari, and Amin Thompson. I remember, Torrey was saying Brandon Miller, Amin Thompson, and at first I was like completely disagreeing with everything he said about Amin Thompson, but the more I watched him, the more I was like, okay, I see it. Like I see it. Amin Thompson could be really good, and I'm bought into Amin Thompson for sure. So that alone, Amin Thompson added to this young core, I really, really love it. And Eason, of course, like this is my favorite young core in the league. Şengün, didn't even mention him. Favorite young core in the league by far. Maybe not by far. That might be over-exaggerating. But it's a really, really good young core. I just question how much they'll be able to develop with some of the vets they've brought in.
Yeah, I already mentioned this, but I just don't think they have the guy who can lead them all. And that's why I think they brought in VanVleet, and that's why they're reaching for that. But I also don't agree that I don't know why they paid him and Dylan Brooks so much money for so many years. It's like, if you want to bring in a vet, you can bring in cheap, vets.
Or even do like what Detroit did and trade for Bojan or Bogdan.
Yeah.
Or Bojan, Bojan, like on a small, little contract for a few years. But
and Detroit's had Corey Joseph for the past few years.
That
who's
too.
Like a vet point guard who didn't cost a lot. But so it almost feels like they're trying to speed up the.
It does.
It too much. I am a huge Jabari Smith guy. I think he's. I thought he should have potentially gone number 1 in that draft. He was my favorite player that year. Just anyone who can shoot like that from that size, but then he gets into the league and doesn't shoot like that, so that becomes a problem. But he's starting to. He had a really good second half or last couple months of this season, and showed a few things in summer league before he got shut down. So yeah, I think he could break out. I don't know if they have an immense. He's going to be special, man. He can do so many things. He's so athletic. He should be like an elite defender. But like you said, a guy like Tari Eason, who made one of the all-rookie teams last year, and who I really like is like a defender/hustle guy, and just continues to get, for some reason, no teams want to just hand him the role. Like, he even came off the bench a lot in college. And, so you bring in Dylan Brooks, it's like, well, why don't you just play Tari Eason?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So they have a lot of guys like that. I think the difference for me why I didn't include them is I think Jalen Green is really good, but I don't think he's anywhere close to like Anthony Edwards good. And so it's hard for me to, like, the way I think about Anthony Edwards and how he's going to be a star, I don't feel that way about Jalen Green. Like, I think it's like fringe all-star. Like Anthony Simons we talked about, I think he's more in that group than he is like Halliburton or Anthony Edwards type level, which is, I mean, obviously, probably not fair to him, but that's just my reasoning why I didn't have Houston in my top 10. Is just they have a ton of guys that I like, that are all really good players. Cam Whitmore could end up being the best player in the draft, even though he fell to 20th. But like, well, maybe not the best because you got.
I'm about to say we got Scoot and Wemby, yeah. So I'm about to say.
But like, he looked really freaking good in summer league, and that he's going to make a lot of teams. And
he should have a huge chip on his shoulder, falling as far as he did. And then back to what you were saying about one guy, maybe they don't have the leader. If I was, and I agree with that. If I was to bank on one guy, I feel like it could be Amin Thompson. Maybe he seems like really mature. Jalen Green sometimes feels immature to me, but maybe that changes down the line.
Getting the guy you don't want to mention out of there might help Jalen Green a lot too.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's true. And then another thing, I don't know how much stock we put into it, but there was that Dropping Dimes account that said the Rockets were going to get Brogdon. So if that's true, I don't like that either. That's another problem. Like, I mean, it feels weird.
As a Blazer fan, if they want to trade us some good picks and
I agree.
A young guy for Brogdon, I mean, because you're making a playoff push or whatever,
go for it. Yeah, we'll accept it for sure. I agree, but I would hate it for them. I don't think Brogdon elevates them at all, but. That's the way they want to run their team, it feels like. So, but what's your number one?
Well, real quick, if Thompson can be a point guard, like a true point guard, I think that's the one thing that's hurt their young guys' development is they don't really have someone that runs the offense and sets the table. Now, that's why they brought in Van Vliet, but if we're just talking about young cores, he obviously doesn't factor into that. So Van Vliet could help them in that regard, but it doesn't help their young core be better than other ones, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But anyways, my number one top young core in the league is the Orlando Magic.
Okay.
I love Paulo Banchero. I just think having a guy who can create his own shot and pass the ball at that size is an element to a game that you can build around, and that teams. Almost every team that has a player in a similar build ends up being really good, as long as they're healthy. And then you add a guy like Franz Wagner, who I'm also really high on. I think they'll mesh really well together in the future. I really like Jalen Suggs coming into the draft. He obviously hasn't had the greatest first 2 years. Showed a little bit more in his second year than he did his first year, but he definitely needs to take a step. I'm not the biggest Anthony Black fan, but he is potentially an elite defender, can handle the ball. If he ever learns how to shoot a little better, he could absolutely be one of those guys who elevates a team too as a bigger guard who can handle the ball. So they have all these players, and then Wendell Carter Jr. I think put it over the top for me because he is a really solid center, and still, I was actually surprised he was still under 25.
Me too. I kind of was.
It feels like he had been in the league for a while. And then I had Jet Howard 11th on my draft board, which is where they took him. A lot of people thought that was too high, but I think this guy. I think he was a little too flashy maybe in college, and when you're a good player, defenses can key on you and stuff. And I think he kind of struggled with that a little bit. But playing off Banchero and Franz Wagner, I think he's going to get open looks that he hasn't had in his entire life. And so I think he's going to be a really good pickup for them as well. And so you have basically what I consider a 5-star chip, and that's Paulo Banchero. And then you have definitely, I think, a 4-star guy in Franz. And then a potential 4-star in Anthony Black. I just think, and then you have all these other guys. Caleb Houston's a shooter off the bench. You got, you mentioned all of them earlier. Cole Anthony, you mentioned, but he's had his moments in the NBA. He can score the ball
for sure,
and I think some of the pressure will be off him this year as well. He can maybe be a shooter instead of having to run the offense. So yeah, and then I don't know if he's gonna make the team, but slam dunk champion Mac McClung is technically on the roster right now. So,
Yeah.
but no, all kidding aside, I just think this team they had one of the best records from I forgot what the dates were, but like after their slow start, they actually were a really good team, and then they kind of tanked at the end. Luckily, the Blazers out tanked them because we wouldn't have moved up if we didn't. But I just think they're the one team that I can say has both the quantity and the quality, and so that's why I have them much higher than you did.
Yeah, everything you said, agree with. I wanted to ask you if you may have said this before, and I just don't remember. But if you were the Magic on draft night, do you think they made the right decision by taking Paulo over Jabari?
Yes.
Okay.
I do. I wasn't sure at the time, but as it became clear that Jabari's not really a playmaker, and I kept thinking about this, like, you have your Jokic's and your Luka Doncic's and stuff, and LeBron James, like those guys all like are big for their positions and can pass the ball and make things happen, and it's I hate to keep using this word, but it's a game changer when you have a player at a non-point guard position that's big and can do the things that Paulo Banchero can do. So as I thought about it more, I had a video before last year just talking about how I think Banchero is going to elevate that team and eventually be one of those guys we talk about in that same category. And so, yeah, I think ultimately the Magic definitely made the right decision, because I was a little worried about him, like his shot coming around, but his turnaround jumpers looked really nice this summer. It looked pretty good last year. His ability to score the ball was evident right away playing, and just I just think that's a guy you build an entire roster around, and you feel good about doing it. Whereas Jabari is more of a plug and play into a good roster already, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Is there anything that surprised you with my list? Anything at all?
I was actually surprised you had the Blazers at 6. I thought you were gonna have, I thought you were gonna go more homerism, but
the one that surprised me for you was the Rockets not even being on your list. I was shocked by that, but I understand with all your reasonings. But
who are you gonna take off?
What do you mean?
I don't know who.
Who should you have taken off?
Yeah.
That's
all of them says they were number one for you.
Yeah. I don't know. No, I didn't mind your list. Like, I don't know if there was anybody I would have taken off. I mean, the only thing I guess I could say was maybe the Cavs, because they don't have enough young guys. But
yeah,
I mean, Garland and Mobley are just so good. So I don't totally disagree with it. What your reasoning is at all. So I don't hate it.
Yeah, I guess the Cavs don't really have many of their picks in the future either, so that might be hard for them to add to that young core. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of stuck with just those two. So yeah, I could definitely see that. I was probably a little unfair to the Rockets, but I do think it's so weird, because I had Jabari Smith like basically number one on my board almost that entire season, but looking at it now, I think they need a man to be that star, and I think he can be. It's actually, if Scoot went. I know we had these heated debates on it, but I was always thinking of Brandon Miller, kind of like what I was saying about Jabari, is like
next
a plug and play guy.
Yeah, next to Dame,
like a shooter, with some size at the forward position. If we were going into full rebuild mode and we were for sure trading Dame, I would have
in.
100% wanted a men. Over
I agree. I didn't agree with it at first when Tori was saying it, but I came around on it. And yeah, Amon, if Scoot did go at 2, I would have loved taking Amon over Brandon Miller. I think that would have been the right. I mean, Brandon Miller falls to Houston. People might have been shocked by that, but yeah, Amon Thompson, I'm a big fan now. So
we should note that we recorded this before the Blazers played their first preseason game, so we do not know what happens yet, or if Scoot plays well or was awful playing later tonight.
Yeah, that could change my list if he goes out there and drops 40. Maybe they're the number 1 young core, but no, this is before the preseason game. So, but you have anything else to add before we sign off here?
So next week, we would, I think we're going to do season predictions, right?
Yeah.
Both standings and maybe awards too. And then, so I want to hear what you guys out there watching, where would you rank the Houston Rockets specifically? Do you agree with me that they're kind of a fringe top 10 team, or do you agree with Brady there that they're the best young core in the league, or somewhere in between? And then where do you have our Portland Trailblazers as well in terms of that? I really want to see your guys' answers to those questions.
Yeah, man. Comment down below. Drop a like. Subscribe if you're new around here. Tori's building something special over here, so make sure you join the train if you're new around here. But I think that's going to do it for us. We will see you next week for episode 3. This has been HoopsCrush, and we're saying peace.